Well, good night, everyone. This is something a little different for me. Doing Bible study tonight from from my home, because with the COVID situation going on and everything that's happening right now. But just goes to show you that you can have church anywhere. But mind you, don't become complacent. Don't neglect the fellowship of God's children in His house. And hopefully things will get back to normal soon, and we'll be able to fellowship in the church with each other once again. But tonight we're going to take a look at the book of Joshua. We are in this Bible study to where we are literally trying to do a book a night. I'm not going to complete this book tonight because I want to take my time with it. Hopefully next week, if Stephanie's not able to teach, I will pick up and finish the rest of Joshua. So we're going to look at the first 7 verses tonight. We've already studied Genesis through Deuteronomy. So just kind of recap a little bit. Of course, we know that Genesis is the book literally of the beginning. The beginning of man, the beginning of creation. The beginning of fall of man. The great covenant that was made with Abraham and as well with Noah. And then, we move into the book of Exodus. Exodus is a book of deliverance. The children of Israel were in bondage, and they were delivered from Egypt's bondage. Our God showed up and delivered them. And then, of course, we go into the book of Leviticus, which is really a book of telling them how they needed to worship. Focused a lot on the blood sacrifice. Whether we choose to accept it or not, the Bible is full of blood. And the blood of Jesus Christ is what cleanses us and makes us free. It's what washes us white as snow. So for most people, the book of Leviticus is a book they tend to stay away from, but I really enjoyed that study. Then you look at Numbers, and you see how the census were done, how they began to split up their land, also how they began to wander because they didn't keep the commandments. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. And so their failure to believe kept them wandering in the wilderness. And then you get to the book of Deuteronomy, which is a book of repetition. God repeats what He's already said in some of the earlier books of Moses. And He does it through Moses to a brand new generation. You have to remember they've been wandering in the woods, in the wilderness. So their children's been born. And also when we get into the book of Joshua, you'll see that actually out of the people that were delivered out of Egypt's bondage, of the first generation, so to speak, only 2 would enter into the promised land, and that would be Joshua and Caleb. So in chapter 1, we see that it says in verse 1, "Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses my servant is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all his people unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel." So we see here this bridge that is being created. The nation is being they're being led out of the wilderness and are about to be led into the promised land. And so here's the thing: God made this promise to Moses. But here's the thing: God keeps His promises. And if one of His servants happens to die, God has another plan. It's not like He's having to figure out what's going on the fly. He knows what's going on. And so Joshua was that plan. Joshua was the one that would lead the children into the promised land. And so the book of Joshua is kind of broken up into 3 different parts, really. The first portion of the book of Joshua, chapters 1 through 5, is Israel entering into the land, entering into the promised land, that is. Chapter 6 through 12 is the nation conquering the land. And then the last portion is chapters 13 through 24, and it's the nation distributing the land among the 12 tribes. And so just to kind of recap again, the entire generation that left Egypt, all were dead except for their children and two, Joshua and Caleb. And so Joshua is now taking kind of Moses' role into leading the children of Israel. And so you see, in chapter 1, God is telling Joshua, hey man, it's time for you to take control. It's time for you to step up. You're gonna be the one to take and fill Moses' shoes. So Moses has passed away. That's a good lesson for everybody to learn. Nothing of God dies when the man of God dies. God has someone else ready to take his place. God does not work by chance. He does not work by coincidence. God has everything under control, and it's laid out exactly the way he wants. In verse 3 it says, every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that I have given unto you, as I said unto Moses. Every place the sole of your foot will tread on, I've given to you, as I said unto Moses. He's saying, I'm keeping this promise. Just because Moses isn't here anymore doesn't mean that my promise died with Moses. My promise will stand forever. If you look at verse 6, it says, be strong and of good courage, for unto his people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Be strong and of good courage. God is saying to them, you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to worry. Things are going to be just like I said. And if you look at verse 8, it says, the book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Verse 8, the book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. And he's saying, you shall meditate in that day and night, that you might observe to do all that is written. So God is saying, stay in my word. Stay in my word. Follow the law. Don't depart from it. And you will prosper. You will prosper. It's something internal. Something external was commanded. Internal, be of good courage. External, stay in the word. I'm giving you the land. Remember the commandments. And pass it on. Pass it on. Be a man of courage. Be a man of the word. Now they're entering the land of Canaan. And it's called Canaan because it's a group of the people that live there were Canaanites. And so God promised them that they would enter into this land of Canaan, the promised land, that we know that flowed with milk and honey. And chapter 2 begins now with Joshua the son of Nun. He sends out 2 men to secretly go and spy on Jericho. And if you remember before, Moses sent out 10 spies. And only Joshua and Caleb agreed that they would be able to go in and take over the land. But everybody else was afraid. They were afraid because of they were gigantic people there, and they were afraid. But Joshua believed that they could overtake it. He believed that with God on their side, they would be able to take over. But he sends 2 spies to spy secretly to go and spy on Jericho. And so they went in, and they come in, and they find none other than a harlot named Rahab. Now, we know that basically Rahab was a prostitute. She was a woman of ill repute. She was not someone that people would look up to. But she was willing to help these 2 spies. And in fact, Hebrew 11, chapter 31, speaks of that faith. The faith that the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe when she had received the spies with peace. This just goes to show here also that God can take anyone from any stature and make something out of them. Rahab was not the type of person that you would think would have values to her. But God can change people. And He can take anyone and make something great out of them. And so she tells the spies that, I've done this favor for you. I've helped you. I've kept you from being killed. And I want you to spare me and my family. In verse 12, she says, Now therefore I pray you, swear unto me by the Lord, since I have showed you kindness, that you will also show kindness unto my father's house, and give me a true token. And that you will save alive my father, and my mother, and my brethren, and my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. And the man answered her, Our life for your life. If ye utter not this our business, and it shall be, when the Lord hath given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with thee. They're saying, you've helped us. And we're telling you, if you don't let anyone know while we're here what our business is about, then we will deal with you with favor. Our Lord will deal with you with favor. And you and your family will be spared. And they said, if you let the scarlet rope down, as we begin to pass by, we'll see that, and we will not destroy your home. We will not kill your family. And you think about it, and back in the days of the bondage, on the last plague, when all the firstborn males were killed, what did God tell them to do? He told them to apply the blood to their doorpost, and that the death angel would pass by. So this is kind of somewhat similar in the fact that, hey, give us this sign. Give us this sign, and we'll make sure you and your family are taken care of. We'll make sure that no harm comes to you. And so if you begin to look in chapter 3, we come to the crossing of Jordan. They're about to cross the Jordan River and start heading. And so Joshua rose up early in the morning, and they removed from Shittim and came to Jordan, and he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. And it came to pass after 3 days that the officers went through the host, and they commanded the people, saying, When ye see the ark of the covenant of the Lord God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then ye shall remove from your place and go after. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, and about 2,000 cubits by measure. Come not near unto it, that ye may know the way by which ye must go, for ye have not passed this way heretofore. And Joshua said unto the people, Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And he was speaking the truth, and God was about to do something amazing. The Levites, they were the tribe of the priest. They were going to take the Ark of the Covenant, and they were going to carry the Ark of the Covenant. And basically by carrying that, it showed that God was with them. It was a symbol that God was with them. And in the Ark of the Covenant inside contained 3 things: the tablets of the law, a pot of manna, and Aaron's rod. And so they were going to carry this. And they began to march, and they began to get down to the river. And now, mind you, during this time period, this is the flooding time period, that the Jordan River would actually flood. Most times it was only about 100 feet wide, but during flooding stages, it was over 1 mile wide. And so they're at a period where the river is flooding. And the Levites, or the priests, they step into the water. They put their feet in the water. And God stops the flow of the water. He stops the flow of the water. And the children of Israel walk across. Verse 16 says that the waters which came down from above stood and rose up, a pond and heap very far from the city, Adam, that is beside Jericho, and those that came down toward the sea of the plain, even the salt sea, failed and were cut off. And the people passed over right against Jericho. And the priests that bare the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of Jordan, and all the Israelites passed over on dry ground, until all the people were passed clean over Jordan. They walked on dry ground. Just like God parted the Red Sea for the children of Israel to cross, they walked on dry ground. They didn't walk in mud. The ground was completely dry. And some people begin to speculate, and they say, oh, it was just a natural thing that happened. There was an earthquake that happened back in 1267 that stopped the river from flowing for 10 hours. And then another one in 1929 that stopped the river from flowing for 21 hours. But this was nothing natural that took place. This was God's power that took place. This was a supernatural act. God stopped the water. Why? Because His people were willing to put their feet in the water. They were willing to step out on faith, and God made the way for them. They were walking through on dry land. God made a way for them. And so, as you begin to get into chapters 4 and 5, he goes in chapter 4, he tells them to go out, every man, and pick up 12 stones. And basically build a memorial for what had happened. They were instructed to take 12 stones out of the Jordan River and pile them up as a memorial. Chapter 4, verse 19 says, and the people came up out of Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and encamped in Gilgal in the east border of Jericho. They came up and they camped out on the first day of the 10th month. And they've made it across the river, and now they're in the land of Canaan. They're at this place called Gilgal, and it literally means in Hebrew circle. And so a lot of scholars believe that once upon a time this was a site for pagans to worship. And so now the children of Israel are reclaiming it, and it's being redeemed. They've kind of set up their base camp there. So by a miracle of God and by the leadership of Joshua, over 2 million people have crossed over the Jordan River on dry land, and now they're in the Promised Land. They finally made the place where they had been intending to go when they were wandering through the wilderness for 40 years. It should have only took them 11 days to get from Egypt to Canaan, but because of their greed, because of their complaining, because of their unwillingness, they wandered in a big circle for 40 years. And so chapter 5, it begins, and they're about to get ready to go into battle, but they're not ready yet. There's one thing they got to do. They got to get themselves in order. They got to get themselves right with God. They had neglected to circumcise all the male children the entire time they were wandering in the wilderness. And they neglected to celebrate the Passover. So they do that in this chapter. Chapter 5, verse 4 says, and this is the cause why Joshua did circumcise all the people that came out of Egypt, that were males, even all the men of war died in the wilderness by the way after they came out of Egypt. Now all the people that came out were circumcised, but all of the people that were born in the wilderness by the way as they came forth out of Egypt, them they had not circumcised. And so they're getting themselves in line with God. They're getting themselves back in order, observing the things that they need to observe. In fact, in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 16, Moses told the children of Israel to circumcise the foreskin of their heart and not be stiff-necked no longer. Literally what he was saying is cut away that skin out of your heart. Cut that hardness out of your heart and quit being so stubborn. And that's what stiff-neck refers to, as being stubborn. Stephen, in Acts chapter 7 said the same thing to the Jews right before they stoned him. He was giving them the same words that Joshua said, or Moses said. To cut away that, to not be stiff-necked. Don't resist the Holy Spirit. Listen to what God is saying. And so circumcision meant far more than just an outward symbol and a covenant. It was a symbol unto God, and it meant to live in the Spirit, to live for the Lord, and to cut away the fleshly desires. And we know that was a covenant that was made with Abraham. In verse 12 of chapter 5, we notice here that something stops. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna anymore, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. So after they had finished the old corn, the manna stopped. God did not provide manna for them anymore. Why? Because they were going to be eating from the fruit of the land of Canaan. They were going to be reaping that. And if you remember, there was grapes there as big. It took so big that it took 2 people to carry them. And so now they're not eating manna. They're eating the fruit of the land of Canaan. And so God has delivered them. He's brought them through, and He's kept His promise. But the manna stopped. And so think about it. As the children of Israel were wandering through the wilderness, they were living by sight. Every morning they would wake up, there would be the manna. The cloud would guide them by day, and by night it would be a pillar of fire. God would guide them through the presence of He was in the presence of a cloud, and at night He'd be the presence in a pillar of fire. And so they were living literally by sight. But now they're going to be living by faith. Because they're not going to wake up every morning and have the manna. They're not going to have the cloud to guide them or the pillar of fire to guide them. They're going to have to live off of their faith. And just like the priests who took that leap of faith to step in to put their feet into the river of Jordan, the children of Israel are going to have to follow as well. And verse 13 says, And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us, or for our adversaries? And Joshua saw, he lifted his eyes up and saw, there stood a man, and he had his sword drawn. And Joshua basically says, well, are you here for us, or are you for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord, I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth, and did worship, and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? Joshua went to him and said, Are you for us, or are you for our adversaries? That seems like a good question, right? It's a fair question. He had his sword out. Sword was drawn. He said, so basically, are you friend or foe? Because if you're a friend, then you shouldn't be here. But if you're a foe, my sword's about to come out, and I'm going to teach you a lesson. And so, but the answer comes back interestingly. He says, nay. No. And so, what kind of answer is that? No. So, no, you're not for us, or no, you're not against us. It wasn't the answer that was wrong. It was the question that was wrong. Am I on your side? This man is saying the real question is, are you on my side? He said, no, but as the commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped and said, what does my Lord say to his servant? Joshua recognized him as much more than just a man. He recognized him as much more. Just as Moses had that same recognition at the burning bush, he recognized that that was much more. The presence was much more. And so he says, and the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so. Something happened. He saw something. He felt something. He noticed something that convinced Joshua that this wasn't just any mortal man. It wasn't just a mortal soldier. So now we're going to start taking a look at chapter 6 of this book. Now we're into the second section of Joshua. And we're only going to look at chapter 6 and chapter 7 tonight. But in chapter 6, verse 1, it says, now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, see, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go around about the city once. Thus shalt do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of rams' horns. And the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up every man straightway before him. So now they're to go into, they're to begin to march around the walls of Jericho, and it's a gated city. It's shut up. Most of these cities would have walls built around it. Why? Literally to keep out soldiers, to keep out people from attacking them. And so it was shut up. The city was shut up. And so, this land has been promised, and God says, this is what I want you to do. He says, I'm giving Jericho into your hand. And not only will the people fall, but the king and all the mighty men of valor are going to fall. He says to literally for 6 days march around the wall one time a day. And then on the 7th day, march around it 7 times, and the 7 priests will blow the horn. And when the sound of the horn comes, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat. And we know exactly what happened. The wall came tumbling down. It came tumbling down. God once again kept a promise he had delivered. And guess what? They took over the city of Jericho without even a battle. Now think about it. If you were living in Jericho and you seen them marching, you'd think, First day, you might be a little scared. Second day, you might still be a little unsure. But by the 3rd or 4th day, you'd begin to mock and probably laugh. Think, they're not going to do anything. What do they think is going to happen? Just marching around when the walls are going to fall down, or they can't attack us if they don't come inside. But I guarantee you on that 7th day, on that last time around, when the horn sounded and the walls came tumbling down, it was something a little bit different. Verse 23 says, and the young men that were spies went in and brought out Rahab, and her father and her mother and her brethren and all that she had, and they brought out all her kindred and left them without the camp of Israel. And they burnt the city with fire, and all that was therein, only the silver and the gold and the vessels of brass and of the iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. And Joshua saved Rahab the harlot alive, and her father's household, and all that she had. And she dwelleth in Israel even unto this day, because she hid the messengers which Joshua sent out to spy on Jericho. And Joshua adjured them that at the time, saying, Cursed be the man before the Lord that riseth up and buildeth this city Jericho. He shall lay the foundation thereof in his firstborn, and in his youngest son shall he set up the gates of it. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was noised throughout all the country. So Rahab was spared, her family was spared, just as promised. They burnt the city, but they kept the silver and the gold and the brass, and they put it into the treasury of the house of the Lord. It belonged to the Lord. It belonged to the Lord. But I want to go back just for a few minutes in verse 18. It says, And ye in any wise keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourselves accursed. When ye take of the accursed thing, make the camp of Israel a curse, and trouble it. So, there was a warning given out. Don't take, be a partaker. Don't take from the accursed thing. Which meant, literally don't get selfish, don't get greedy. But in chapter 7, and this is where I'm going to stop tonight, we see that they come up on the little small town of Ai. Now Jericho's fallen. The children of Israel have overcome Jericho, and so now they're going to, there's this little small city of Ai. And you would think that going into this, they really wouldn't be much to fret about. They've just taken over Jericho. But there was a problem. Achan, who was one of the soldiers, did something that he shouldn't have done. He took the Babylonian clothes, he took some silver, and he took it, and he hid it. Nobody knows about it, right? Nobody saw me. I got away with it. That seemed to be the consensus. But God knew. You see, he could have kept these things a secret from the children of Israel. He could have kept these things a secret from Joshua. But he couldn't keep them a secret from God. And so, here we see the children of Israel had just taken over Jericho, but now they're running for their lives from the people of Ai. And in fact, they lost 36 people. 36 males died. And you know how many more than died at the Jericho? 36. Because there was 0 lives lost from the children of Israel. Why? Because they were at Jericho, they were in the will of God. They were doing what they were told to do. But here, as they're going into battle with Ai, they're not in the will of God. They're cursed. All because of Achan. All because of his selfishness and his greed. He brought the whole tribe down. And so, literally, God tells Joshua. He says, Therefore the children of Israel could not stand before their enemies, but turned their backs before their enemies, because they were accursed. Neither will I be with you any more, except you destroy the accursed from among you. Verse 13 says, Up, sanctify the people, and say, Sanctify yourselves against tomorrow. For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, There is an accursed thing in the midst of thee, Israel, thou canst not stand before thine enemies until ye take away the accursed thing from among you. In the morning, therefore, ye shall be brought in according to your tribe, and it shall be that the tribe which the Lord taketh shall come according to the families thereof, and the family which the Lord shall take shall come by households, and the household which the Lord shall take shall come man by man. And it shall be that he that is taken with the accursed thing shall be burnt with fire, he and all that he hath, because he hath transgressed the covenant of the Lord, and because he hath wrought folly in Israel. So Joshua rose up early in the morning and brought Israel by their tribes, and the tribe of Judah was taken. And he brought the family of Judah, and he took the family of the Zerites, and he brought the family of the Zerites man by man. And Zabdah was taken. And he brought the household man by man of Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah was taken. So Achan's whole family was killed because of his actions. The children of Israel lost soldiers because of his actions. And I think this is a good stopping place for tonight, because what we see is, if you're in the will of God, He'll bring the walls down for you. He will make the impossible possible. But if you're out of the will of God, He will punish you. And you will pay for your sins. You can't hide anything from Him. Sure, we can hide things from each other, keep secrets, but God knows all along. And so, if there's one thing that we can take out of this chapter 7, is that if we don't stay in God's will, if we do the exact opposite of what God says, He's going to punish us. And things are going to happen. So next week we'll pick up starting with chapter 8, and we'll try to finish out the chapter. But I hope everyone has a good night tonight. Again, this is something very different, being able to do Bible study from my couch at home. But I just want you to know that I love each and every one of you, and I can't wait till we can all just gather together at the church house and just celebrate and worship Christ. But until then, just remember this: worship wherever you are. Love the Lord wherever you are, and keep Him as close to you as possible wherever you are. Good night.